You're listening to the LA Football Podcast.
Man, what's going on, Los Angeles? Welcome back to the LA Football Show here on the LA Football Network, live on the Mightier 1090 ESPN Radio. Thank you all, as always, for making us a part of your day. I'm Ryan Dyrud, joined as always by the madman Jamal Madney, and this is your Trojan Huddle, USC Trojans Talk. Our spring game was last week. We talked extensively about that on our Monday Night Live and what we got from that. And so we'll talk a little bit, some different news. Ethan White from Florida was going to transfer. Now he's not. Our thoughts on that. We're waiting on the big bear from Georgia. Is he come to SC? Like everything is leading everyone to believe what that means for their defense. Plus, we'll see if some other stuff pops up that we can talk about. So, Jamal, welcome back from the break on radio and podcast. How we doing, though?
Doing well, Ryan. Excited to get into it with the men of Troy and all of their great expectations. You know, not to quote Shakespeare, but it's the year of great expectations.
Expectations. Yes, it is. From here on forward, it's the year
Yes.
of the great expectations, as they should be for USC football. So, show is always brought to you by our friends at BetOnline. Head to betonline.ag today. Use our promo code BELIEVE. That is BLEAV. Gets you a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. NFL draft is coming up. NHL playoffs, NBA playoffs, MLB in full swing, NASCAR F1. Basically, every sport that is around is going on right now with the exception of football, but there is still offseason football bets to make. So do it all at betonline.ag. Once again, that promo code is BLEAV. 50% welcome bonus. Tell them the guys at the LA Football Network sent you. So first of all, I keep getting the comments, and we've said it before, this background we have, it is not supposed to be UCLA Bruin centric, but I understand how it looks like that, blue and gold. It's supposed to just be a generic background. We cover all four teams here in LA, but we gotta do a Cardinal and gold one for our USC segment. Cause I understand, especially if you're just tuning in for the Trojans, where you see that background, and I see a lot of anger in some of the comments. So I want everyone to know we hear you. I am not personally a design guy, but I will have someone do one. Even if we can just change this, color scheme from gold and blue to gold and cardinal. So I hear you. I hear everyone.
I love it. Ryan, to be fair, I mean, if you look at the helmet sort of above us, it looks a little golden. It looks like there could be like a UCLA on the side there. It's a generic helmet, but I can see it. It's a golden helmet. So if it has UCLA on the side, that's bad. Okay. Yeah. And if it doesn't have UCLA on the side, that might even be worse because it's a golden domer then. And then, we're sort of promoting Notre Dame over here, which is the last thing we want to do. So we hear you. In the words of Larry David in Curb Your Enthusiasm, when he was sort of talking about in one episode, we hear you, we acknowledge you, we appreciate you.
Yes. And now we need to take action and change it. So hopefully by Monday. By Monday Night Live, I'll try to have something. We had it designed a while back, and ironically enough, all the Rams, the Bruins, and the Chargers all have some form of yellow, gold, and blue. So it's like all very. Those three all have the same, and the Trojans are the one outlier, which is great, but they're the one outlier with the cardinal and gold. So we'll make that happen. We'll make it happen. So let's start with the unfortunate news. Ethan White, who had committed to transferring, into the transfer portal from Florida, big offensive tackle, committed essentially to come to USC and was going to be a very big lift for this offensive line that obviously, lost Andrew Voorhees, lost, other guys in the draft. And it's kind of this, if there's any question marks on offense, it is the offensive line, which I think they'll get figured out. But he was going to be a nice lift to addressing those needs just purely based on size, had played in the SEC, or at least was groomed in the SEC. So those, big trench guys and was going to come in here. And now due to injury concerns has decommitted from transferring. So your just overall thoughts on kind of that unfortunate news and where does SC turn from here?
Yeah, really disappointing, Ryan, to be honest with you, because I think the one area right now, there's a few, but I think we're feeling a lot better about the front seven, especially after that spring game performance when we look at the likes of Anthony Lucas and Jack Sullivan and Jameel Muhammad and Mason Cobb, and really excited to see what we have there in addition to the Corey Foreman evolution, hopefully. So feeling like this defense can make a bit of a step. Where there needs to be kind of recovery is on the offensive line after the loss of Voorhees, after the loss of Nealon, after the loss of so much experience. And so White was really going to play a pretty significant role in this rebuild of the offensive line. Now without him, it's a little thin up front. A lot of young guys with a lot of talent, but you need to be able to round that out with some experience. So I really expect USC to be very active now in the transfer portal on the other side of everyone completing spring ball and really going and attacking the SEC and the Big Ten, your Indianas, your Purdue's, your Mississippi States, and really places like that, or some folks that may have fallen out of favor in terms of the depth chart after the spring on some of the more elite programs and make a pluck or two. So I think that USC probably needs to get one or two offensive linemen in the transfer portal. And I think this only sort of accelerates that thinking and emphasizes that thinking.
Is this and just piggybacking off what you just said, but with the loss of White now, is this a situation where if they don't get anyone else, if this offensive line, as it's constructed, is the offensive line it's going to be going into the 2023 regular season, obviously there'll be concerns, but do you think it is enough of a concern where they may not be a Pac-12 title contender, they may not be a playoff contender, or is the talent enough, the greatness of Caleb is enough, they'll get by, it's just a little unfortunate roadblock that now they're going to have to, get over?
Yeah, Ryan. I mean, Caleb is proven to be so special, particularly in the ability to extend plays and the ability to really Houdini his way out of pass rush and really be unbothered by it, truthfully. So hard to have that young man come back for his defending Heisman season and be really concerned about anything offensively, truthfully. But I do think if the offensive line is constructed as is, I don't think this team can make any sort of a significant dent if they get to the CFP. It's not only going to be one and done, it's going to be sort of emphatically one and done. And also, I think that there could be some challenges if they have to play a bigger, more physical team like Oregon State in a Pac-12 title game, or if there's some critical moments against Oregon, or there's some critical moments on the road against Notre Dame, or there's a moment or two in a Utah game that could kind of swing. So I think there's some moments in the season that could cause them some discomfort as presently constructed. But overall, given Caleb, given those receivers, given the backs, they should be in a position to be able to overcome whatever deficiency the offensive line has if they remain intact.
Yeah, for me, and I agree with everything you said, I think it's definitely would be concerning as you get into those big time games, even a Pac-12 time, even like a Utah who just plays very, very sound in the trenches. And as you mentioned, Oregon State, it definitely would not be ideal, but I think specifically looking at the USC Trojan season, which is all probably fans care about, I think they'll be okay just because of how great Caleb is, how talented and deep the running back room is, and how talented and deep the receiving room is, that you just, as long as they can get things out quick and Caleb can be Caleb, to be okay. But would be more concerning for me when you look big pictures of Caleb is we talked, 2 episodes ago about as great as Caleb is, as deserving he is the Heisman, as deserving he is as the moniker of the best college QB in football, the undoubted, barring anything crazy, number 1 overall pick. But we did say there were some things we wanted to see this year to improve his maturation to becomes a pro quarterback. And some of that was going to be pocket presence, decision-making, quickness of getting the ball out. If the offensive line is a weak point, you're basically asking Caleb to be Superman all season long, which I think he will do for the Trojans, but it may actually hurt his maturation going to the pros because he's not going to have that time to develop those skills that will be required in the NFL because he's just running for his life all the time, making miraculous things happen. So that would be my more concern. It's not so much necessarily the USC season. I think they'll be okay, but it's more of what Caleb can do at the next level based on what he's forced to do throughout the entire year in 2023.
such a great point, Ryan, because in that particular case, he's going to be forced to have to dance around more and extend plays more, which are things that he's not going to be able to do at the next level. So he's going to have to rely on habits that are not going to be transferable at the next level, just as a workaround to be able to keep USC in line to win the things that they want to win over the course of this season. That's an excellent point. And I think a related point to that is that I don't think the offensive line's deficiency, if it stays intact as is right now, will necessarily show up in a moment in a game or over the course of a game as it could over the course of a season. Because if your offensive line is weaker, Ryan, and Caleb starts taking more hits over the course of the season, then as you start progressing in the season, that next hit could ding him up a little bit or bang him up a little bit. And then, you're in a position where, is he compromised? And we saw what happened to this offense when he was compromised in the Pac-12 title game. And so then that really then alters your season more than just sort of going in schematically X's and O's. We can't block this guy, so he's going to blow up this play. That accumulated effect of potentially taking some hits could then have really negative consequences later on, because then he's going to be a little bit more worn down. And if he takes, that one hit can really then set him back. Because the one thing that Caleb really had going for him is because of his elusiveness and because the offensive line was good enough last year, he was able to dance around, do all the things that we talked about. But do you remember really a significant big hit he took at all of last year? Really, the only hit he took of that anyone can remember is that long scramble against Utah. And that was more because he was running so long and he got kind of tripped up and his legs got caught under him. But I can't really recall a time where he just got blasted, on a play where you were like, man, that was a huge hit. I think everyone remembers the Latu sack on Caleb, not necessarily because it was a big hit, but just because in that moment in the game, and it was a very memorable play. But I can't really recall Caleb taking a big hit at all last season. And that contributed to USC's success going into December more than anything. Yeah, and I think that's really the key here. Is A, that accumulated effect. B, then the fact that if he's gonna get blasted in the ribs by going 3-step drop and out and having to make all these quick decisions, does that alter his mechanics in any way to prevent the hits? And then does it just force him to go play sandlot ball more than he should this year? And maybe, I don't want to say hurt his development, but not maybe optimize his season to be pro ready as much as it could be.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but all this hopefully is conversation for naught, because I think we both agree that Lincoln and company will be very aggressive in the transfer portal. I would be shocked if one, maybe 2 or 3 offensive linemen end up in Cardinal and Gold come the fall in this latest transfer portal after the spring ball. So we will keep everyone obviously up to date, post on that, keep it here on the LA Football Network. I do want to say our Salute to Troy podcast finally back up and running. The great Alfred Rowe, who's hosted that. I filled in some time. Jamal filled in some time, but we now have a great co-host, Trojan legend, Candace Davis Price, who is a gold medal hurdler at the World Championships, was an All-American. And so she will be co-hosting. They just launched their first episode together. It's up today, live on LA Football Network. So they will also have plenty of Trojans news and updates for you throughout the rest of this offseason, obviously going into the year. So pumped about that. Just want to drop that so everyone knows to go check that out. Salute to Troy podcast, everywhere you get your podcasts, on our USC LAFB YouTube channel or LAFBnetwork.com. But Jamal, switching over to the defense, the big bear everyone wants. We briefly mentioned it last episode. We didn't really dive into it. Bear Alexander, Georgia, big guy, young kid, 2 sacks in the Natty. He's in the transfer portal. All indications, the crystal ball predictions are saying USC. Maybe it was just dumb luck, but when it was first announced that he was entering the portal, I literally tweeted, "See you in LA as a Trojan," and now it's seeming like it might come true. I was merely just guessing, but hey, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. Now, obviously, it's not a done deal yet, but it's, again, indicating that. So let's just pretend that it is going to happen. What does this do for this front seven that, as you mentioned, is going to be so much improved. As we saw at the Spree game, looks much improved. The transfers of Anthony Lucas is huge. Kyon Bars is a massive human being. You hope the development of Solo and some of these other guys are going to just be much improved in year 2 of this system. You obviously get some of the linebacker transfers in and Cobb and Muhammad. But now if you can get another big body there at the tackle position, what does that do for your defense that was, for lack of better words, so bad last year, and there's really nowhere to go but up this year?
No, I mean, it's absolutely massive, Ryan. When you talk about Lucas, Bars, and then potentially Bear Alexander, and you've got kind of 3 deep at the interior lineman position, and the ability to not only just rotate them to keep them fresh, but even potentially in some packages have them out there at the same time with potentially a Corey Foreman. And then you've got Muhammad and Cobb and a Gentry. I mean, look at that 7 right there. I mean, it's absolutely significant what you can do in terms of just physicality in the front 7, blow up run holes, suffocate quarterbacks in terms of hurrying them and collapsing that pocket. I mean, it just changes the game considerably, because I think when you get that third interior lineman that you can really rely on, there's really no gap for the offense to really exploit. There's no A gap. There's no B gap. There's no C gap. When you have 2 out of the 3, you have to sort of jigsaw them in a way where, you're cheating on one side where you're getting exploited, but it leaves you susceptible a little bit on the back end. It leaves you susceptible on that weak side. When you have 3 guys at the interior, there's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to hide. And so 2 + 1 is not equal to 3 in this case, Ryan. 2 + 1 is equal to 5 or 6 or 7 in this particular case. So to me, Bear Alexander might be the biggest, no pun intended, off-season addition for this team, period. I mean, I don't know if there's a bigger addition than Alexander. I think you could argue that Mason Cobb, just a pure linebacker, pure interior backer, linebacker's linebacker. Muhammad is going to do some really exciting things. Shane Lee and Gentry, I think, are going to compete for that third linebacker spot. Ironically enough, the 2 starters from last year are both going to have to compete for that last starting spot. As great as they are, and I think linebacker was such a position of need, when you can get 3 interior linemen and then the variation off of that, and that becomes your bread and butter, that's the one thing that can really make the step function change for this defense to go from bad to decent.
Yeah, exactly. And it's such a, 6'3", 225, 3 years of eligibility left. So plenty of timing. And again, like, he was, to my knowledge, correct me if I'm wrong, but more of a rotational guy in Georgia. I mean, that was historically one of the best defenses in football. So I don't think he was on the field a ton, but got 2 sacks in the national title game. So certainly when he got reps, absolutely utilized them and would come in and be arguably the best defensive tackle on this unit, or, like you mentioned, just a phenomenal rotation they'll be able to add to. So I think this would be just another huge get for Lincoln Riley. What is it about this coaching staff? And I know Lincoln Riley is, a Texas guy, but they seem to have before Lincoln got to town, Oregon got a real good path to SoCal. I mean, Oregon really took over those SoCal recruits. These last, even dating back to Clay Helton's kind of final year, like, USC has a really nice path in Texas, getting guys from Texas, whether it be transfer portal or just recruits. The 2 freshman running backs are from Texas. Obviously, Bear Alexander is originally from Texas. He was highly touted and recruited by Texas A&M and Texas, and obviously all SEC schools. Miami visited, and they ended up at Georgia. But what is it you think it is that all of a sudden SC has a real nice pipeline in Texas?
Ryan, it's interesting, and it's such a great point. I think it has to do with west of Texas, what's really going on from a college football standpoint. And I think Texas used to actually be a hotbed a little bit for Colorado when they were humming in the early 90s with, Coach Mack. And Texas was a bit of a hotbed for, obviously, OU and Lincoln. I mean, they're neighboring states, but Texas also was a hotbed when Nebraska was Nebraska in the mid to late 90s. So oftentimes when you go east of Texas, That's SEC country. And then you go northeast of Texas, you're in the Midwest. And so sometimes you don't get that same level of focus and attention on Texas as you do in those regions, because they have to win those regions because those are just so competitive, even though California, Texas, and Florida are the three crown jewels, really, still to this day in high school recruiting. But when you go west of Texas and northwest of Texas, you have to look at the landscape. I think that's when SC was down, it allowed an Oregon to come in there. When some teams are down, it allows a Washington to get in there. Sometimes it even allows the Arizona States of the world to get in there because there's just not as much going on west of Texas. But when you can kind of create that direct line of sight into Texas, fly in, fly out, and really sort of make your presence known, it allows those recruits to actually kind of turn their head the other way and be like, whoa, there's a whole other half of the country here. And then when I look at the weather and I look at, the university and the alumni network and getting set up for success, I think USC's done a remarkable job of making that be known. And I think that's what Lincoln's vision was. Remember, his first press conference was saying the Coliseum, we want to make the Coliseum the Mecca of college football again. And so that brings to it a visual of really a centerpiece of college football. And it's making guys aware now of USC in a way they hadn't 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago in the Helton era and in the Sarkisian era too, and even a bit in the Kiffin era as well. So really exciting to see the Lincoln Riley name recognition play out the way it needs to.
Yeah, it's been great to see, and it's exciting to watch the recruiting and the transfers coming in, and it'll be a busy remaining offseason for the portal for Lincoln Riley and the USC Trojans, and we'll have all the updates and all the news for you right here on the LA Football Network. That's all the time we got for Trojan Huddle. We will be back for our final segment on radio talking Chargers, but for all Trojans fans on podcast, have a great weekend. We'll see you all next week.
You're listening to the LA Football Podcast.